thank you for joining me on this live webinar today. Just as we let everyone in from the waiting room, just a little question for you. Maybe if you could open up your chat window and get involved, it'd be great to hear from you. So the question today is, in one word, how do marketing budget conversations usually feel? They may be stressful, unclear, challenging, political, difficult, frustrating. You fill in the blank. So open up your chat windows if you're able. Give me just one word. How do marketing budget conversations usually feel? And we'll just get everyone in from the waiting room as we see what words go into the chat. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Paul coming in first with constrained. Okay, challenging for Marie. Rosie challenging, yes. Another challenging, misunderstood. Okay, very interesting. We'll come back to that. Strained, short. Yeah, sometimes those conversations can be shut down. Unrealistic. Now that's really interesting. So we're going to be getting to that in today's talk. Tense from Millie. Yes, I get it. Is he restricting? Yeah. Unrealistic from Emily. Yeah. Conservative. Awkward. Difficult from Judith. Yeah. Well, I expect miracles, eh? And then stretched. Yeah. Get it. Awkward. These are so good. Yeah. If you've just joined, we're just summing up in one word how marketing budget conversations usually feel. Feel free to pop your word into the chat as we get going. But let's make a little start. So we're going to be talking today on this topic of what should you prioritize in your marketing when budgets are tight. Now, a quick introduction, just in case you haven't been on any of our webinars in the past. So my name is Will. I'm the founder and managing director of an agency called Webbox. We help our clients build and maintain websites and run performance marketing campaigns. And a common theme that I see is that marketers are often under huge pressure to justify decisions, especially when budgets are being questioned. So today, we're going to focus on how to approach those decisions clearly, calmly, and commercially. So that's the plan. Now, a couple of things before we begin, just some kind of housekeeping points, if I may. We are recording today's session, and I'm going to be sharing a copy of this recording with you later this week. Please make this interactive. So I'd love you to use the chat facility or the Q&A feature to share your thoughts today and ask questions. And then at the end of today's webinar, I will make sure that I go through those questions. Now, this is a CPD-accredited webinar. Obviously, the purpose of all of our webinars is to share insight and educate. So if you're working towards points for CPD accreditation, then yes, I'll give you some information towards the end for you to claim those points. And just finally, we love your feedback on these sessions. So many of you drop me a message with feedback, and it's really lovely to see. But also when you share themes or kind of topics that you would like us to speak on. So if you have any kind of topics that you'd love us to run a session on, now is a great time to share them with us because we're planning our next season of webinars. So feel free to drop me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to hear from you. Now, today we're going to cover a number of different points. So here's the plan. We're going to start by looking at why budget pressure can sometimes lead to the wrong marketing decisions. We'll then look at some of the common options businesses consider. From there, I'll talk about why trusted data should sit at the center of each of these decisions. And then the main part of the session is really going to be a practical framework that you can use. And the idea is to give you a clearer way to review your current marketing activity and make more confident recommendations. And then finally, I want to touch on how actually to communicate these conversations and recommendations internally. Now, ultimately, the aim of this session is to be quite practical and useful, and to leave you with this kind of framework so you feel more confident in these scenarios. So hopefully that's what you'll get from this session today. Okay, let's start by setting the scene. When budgets are tight, marketing decisions can become more pressured, more emotional, and often quite reactive. And that's completely understandable. If the business is trying to reduce costs, protect margin, or even make spend just work harder, marketing is naturally going to come under review. But the challenge is that when decisions are made too quickly, they're not always made with the full picture in plain sight. And it can kind of become very easy then to cut things that are the hardest to explain or the hardest to measure, or just things that are just the easiest to pause. But that doesn't necessarily mean that these things are the least valuable. So in today's session, I'm going to kind of look at how to make those decisions more confidently and backed by data. Now, this topic is actually quite timely, in my opinion, because this conversation is happening in the wider industry. You might have seen Gartner's report that they recently released, which is the 2026 CMO Spend Research. And that says that marketing budgets have actually plateaued at around 7.8% of company revenue, which is 18% lower than the mean allocation 4 years ago. But obviously marketers are still expected to deliver more with limited resources or meet higher expectations. And also, we can't have a webinar without mentioning AI, so also handle AI transformation. So I'd really encourage you to look up this research afterwards. It's a really helpful article just to give you a wider perspective of what's happening in the marketing arena. Now, when we talk about budgets being tight, it doesn't always mean a clear budget cut has landed. Sometimes it does. The business might say, look, we need to reduce marketing spend by 20%, or we need to pause activity for the next quarter. But budget pressure can also show up in other ways. It might be that your budget stays exactly the same, but your targets increase. Or you're asked to justify spend more often. And people are really watching closely what you do as a marketing team. Or every invoice, campaign, event, tool, or agency retainer suddenly receives a lot more scrutiny than it did before. And do you know what? When that happens, marketing decisions can become a lot more reactive. The instinct is often to cut quickly because the business needs to protect costs. And in some situations, that's completely understandable. I get it, right? But the danger is that when we cut things quickly, they're not always necessarily the best cuts. You could end up cutting the activity that's easiest to question rather than the activity that's genuinely least valuable. And that might mean reducing brand activity because it's harder to attribute, or pausing SEO because it doesn't always generate immediate inquiries, or cutting reporting and tracking because it feels like admin, even though it's one of the things that helps you make better decisions. So the challenge we're looking at is this. When budgets are tight, how do we make more confident, evidence-led decisions about what to keep, what to improve, what to reduce, and then what to stop? Now, I want to just take a little breath here, and I want to throw a poll up on the screen and get you involved. We're starting to use a few more polls in our webinars because actually what's come back to us in feedback is this is really helpful for other marketers to learn from other marketers what's going on in the landscape. So this is the first of 3 polls in today's webinar. And the question I'm going to put on screen shortly is, have you ever experienced a marketing budget being reduced during your career? And then there's going to be a few different responses. So hopefully on the screen, you should see that poll come up now. I'd love you to get involved today. This is our first of 3 polls. And once you've responded to the poll, I will share the results with you so that we can get a sense of everyone's experience here on today's call. Okay, fantastic. I'll give another 20 seconds for people to use the poll. I think most people have voted by now. So have you ever experienced a marketing budget being reduced during your career? Okay, fantastic. Little countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I need some music in the background, don't I? And then let's end this poll and I'm going to share the results with you. Let's look at them together. Okay, a whopping 43% of you are saying yes in the last 12 months. So this is highly relevant for you. 35% yes, but not recently. 19% saying not yet, but I'm expecting more scrutiny. It's the way of the world, unfortunately. And then 4%, no, I haven't experienced this. You lucky bunch. Absolutely love that. Okay, fantastic. So thank you for getting involved. It's really interesting to see actually the vast majority of you have been through this, and actually the majority have been through it very recently. Right, thank you so much for getting involved in that. So let's move on. So when budgets are reduced, there are a few common ways businesses tend to respond, and I just want to kind of go through those with you today. One option is just to cut everything by the same percentage. So if the budget needs to be reduced by, let's say, 25%, every channel or every area of activity just loses 25%. That's one option, right? Another option is to stop certain channels or activity completely. So that might mean in real terms, pausing paid social or stopping going to events or reducing content creation or cutting back on SEO. That's just a way to stop a particular activity from happening to reduce budget. A third option is to bring more activity in-house. To obviously then reduce cost base for freelancers and agencies. Now, all of these options might be appropriate in some situations, but they can also create problems if they're kind of not used rightly, or kind of maybe if they're used too quickly, or they haven't got the data to back them up. So the approach I want to focus on today is slightly different, which is rather than cutting everything evenly or making decisions based on what's easiest to pause, I'd suggest using the data to make smarter trade-offs. Now that means looking at what is creating value now, what could create value in the future, and where spend might need to be protected, improved, reduced, or stopped. Now, the problem with these options is that they can feel fair, simple, or commercially sensible, but they don't always lead to the best outcome. So if you just cut everything evenly, you're treating every area of marketing as though it contributes the same value. But in reality, some activity may be driving inquiries now, some may be building future demand, and some might not be working hard enough. So stopping channels completely can also create issues. It might save money in the short term, of course, but it can leave gaps later. So for example, if you just pause SEO or content entirely, you may not feel the impact immediately, but you could lose momentum and visibility, which takes a long time to build back up. Now, bringing more work in-house can be the right decision in some cases, but it can also put pressure on internal teams. If people are already busy, then actually quality, consistency, or speed of delivery can then suffer as a result of this. So the key point here is that the easiest cut is not necessarily the best cut for you. So rather than asking, what can we remove quickly? A better question to ask yourself is, what does the evidence tell us we should protect, improve, reduce, or stop? Now that starts with looking at what's working now. So which activity is generating leads and inquiries for you? Where can you see a clear connection between marketing activity and business value? But that's only one side of the picture, right? You also need to look at what supports future demand. Now that might be things like SEO, content creation, brand visibility, trust building, authority, case studies, thought leadership, or just activity that helps people feel more confident about choosing you over someone else. And this is where budget decisions need a bit more nuance. Because just because something isn't generating a lead today, it doesn't automatically mean it should be the first thing to go, right? But equally, if something has no clear evidence of value, no strategic importance, and no realistic plan to improve, it probably does need to be challenged. So the aim is to not simply cut spend. The aim is to cut waste. And there's a difference because actually this is about cutting waste and then hopefully not cutting activity significantly so that you continue the momentum. Now, before I go any further, I want to just briefly connect this back to one of my previous webinars where we looked at how to communicate the value of marketing internally. And a big part of that was around building trust in your data. Because if your tracking is incomplete or your reporting is inconsistent, or we've seen this, stakeholders just don't believe the numbers, it becomes much harder to make decisions confidently. And that matters even more when budgets are tight or reduced. So if you're deciding what to protect, reduce, or stop, you need to know whether the data you're using is reliable. So are your key conversions being tracked properly? Do you know where these leads are coming from? Do you know whether these leads are actually of good quality, which is something many businesses don't explore enough? And I'm not going to recap the whole session today, but actually if you missed it, I'd love you to scan the QR code and it'll just take you to a copy of the recording for you to catch up afterwards. But for today, the main point is this. Before you make budget decisions, make sure the data behind those decisions can be trusted. Now, I want to get into our second poll so that, again, we can kind of see how everyone responds to this. And again, I'll share the results. So the question I'm going to ask is, how confident are you that your current marketing data would help you decide what to protect or cut? Now, this is a multiple choice question. So if you want, you can choose more than one. And you should have the poll on your screen now. So again, love you to get involved. You can choose one or more of these responses. Fantastic. I'll give it another 20 seconds. Got most people's votes, which is fantastic. It's always interesting from my side seeing all the results come in live because you just see all these lovely little sliders go on screen. It's great fun. But that's me just being a data geek. Okay, 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, hopefully everyone's got a vote in. So let's end the poll. I will share these results with you. Let's go through them together. Okay, so very interesting. None of you are very confident in your tracking. That's really interesting. That could be, I guess, one of two reasons. Maybe it's just not fully set up. But also, I guess there's a little bit of the fact that with cookie consent and multiple channels being involved, we can't always see everything end to end. So maybe there's two trains of thought there. So the majority of us then, 56% are somewhat confident, 44% not very confident, and then 13% also opting for we have data, but yourselves or stakeholders don't fully trust it. And this is a really key theme of that previous webinar. So I'd love you to catch up on that if you get a chance. So thank you for being involved in that poll. Hopefully that's another kind of interesting insight that you can take away. Now we're going to move into the practical framework, as I call it, to give you a real practical example of how you can manage these situations internally. So this is our kind of main point that we want to share with you today. You know, when you're reviewing your marketing activity, especially when you're under budget pressure, I think it helps to move away from asking, what should we cut? Because actually that question can push you straight into reduction mode. Instead, I'd suggest reviewing each area of marketing through 4 categories, and they're on screen for you now. So protect, improve, reduce, and stop. So some activity should be protected because it is clearly creating value, either commercially or as part of a wider strategy. Some activity might not be performing as well as it should, but there may be a really good reason for that. The channel might still have potential, but maybe the targeting or messaging or landing page is not quite right and it needs improving. Some activity may need to be reduced because it has some value, but not enough to justify the current level of spend. And then that final category is where you just need to stop completely. If there is weak evidence or poor alignment or just no realistic path to improvement. And the point of this framework is to make budget decisions more structured, more objective, and also easier to explain internally. So let's go through them. I just want to go through each category one by one, just to give you a bit more of a flavour as to how this will pan out in practice. Now, first up is protect. Now, this is the activity you would be very cautious about reducing because there's clear evidence, should we say, that it's working now, or strong strategic reason to keep it going. So that might include channels that are generating quality leads or inquiries. If something is consistently helping the business kind of reaches its objectives and driving commercial value, then it's a very good reason. A very good reason would be needed before you would cut that. But protection shouldn't only apply to activity that creates immediate inquiries. So there may also be longer term activity that is important to protect, even if it's harder to measure in short term. So things like SEO, this is like the obvious one and the go-to, or brand visibility or thought leadership. Because actually they can all create future demand and they can help you build trust with your audience. I'd also include reporting in this category because actually when budgets are tight, it can be tempting to cut back on, reporting platforms and spending time generating really clear reports and tracking and tools and so on, because these things might just feel like overheads. But if those things help you understand what's working, they're actually protecting the quality of your decisions. So the next category I want to touch on is improve. This is for activity that may not be performing strongly right now, but still has potential. And this is an important distinction because underperforming activity doesn't always mean bad activity. So for example, a PPC campaign might be generating poor results because the targeting is too broad, or the wrong bidding strategy is being used, or maybe the landing page is just really weak. A content campaign, on the other hand, might be attracting the right audience, but not giving people a clear next step with a call to action. Or a paid social campaign might not be working well, but could work much better by being repurposed as a retargeting campaign. So before you kind of reduce or stop anything, it's worth asking whether the issue is the activity itself or the way it's currently being delivered. So improve is all about spotting those opportunities. It allows you to say, this isn't working well enough yet, but we can see a path to making it work harder for the business. Now, the third category is reduce. So this is activity that may still have some value, but probably doesn't justify the level of spend, time, or resource. And this is where nuance really matters, because reducing something doesn't have to mean stopping it completely. It might mean narrowing the focus, or reducing the frequency, or tightening the audience, or scaling back the budget. For example, you might have a campaign that performs well for one audience, but maybe poorly for another. In that case, the answer may not be to stop the whole campaign, but to reduce spend in the weaker area. Or you may be producing like high volumes of content, but only some of it is aligned with search demand or sales conversations. And in that case, you might reduce the volume while improving the focus of that content. So the point here is to avoid this kind of all or nothing decision, and understand there is a nuance to it. So reduce is about keeping the parts that still have value whilst removing the excess. As they commonly say, cut the fat. And let's go on to the fourth one, and this is the stop category. So this is usually the hardest one, right? Because stopping activity can feel quite definitive. But sometimes it's just the right decision. Okay, so if something feels like it has weak evidence of value, it's not generating, kind of results for the short term, immediate now, also for the long term, then actually you need to make some sensible and pragmatic decisions, especially when the budget is under pressure. This might be a campaign that has consistently generated the wrong type of inquiry, or a channel that takes up a lot of time but doesn't support your current objectives. It can also be a report or a tool or a platform that I guess exists because it's always existed. Maybe it's a process internally, but actually it doesn't really help anyone make better decisions. And sometimes we do have to step back and make that pragmatic decision to stop something that we've always been doing. Now, the key here isn't to stop things emotionally or reactively. The stop category actually should be a considered decision based on evidence. And when you do stop something, it's also important to be clear about what will happen next. So is the budget being saved, or is it maybe being reinvested elsewhere? And importantly, how will you measure whether that was the right decision in 1, 2, 3 months' time and beyond? Now, once you've got the framework, the next question is how you decide where each activity belongs. Now, this is where you need to look at each area of marketing with a bit more structure. So firstly, ask yourself, is it creating value now? That could mean inquiries or meetings or revenue. In other words, can you see a clear link between the activity and commercial value? Secondly, does it support future demand? So this is where things like SEO, content, brand awareness, trust building, so on might lie. And it might not always generate an inquiry today, but that doesn't automatically mean it has no value, as we all know. Thirdly, do you trust the data behind it? Because if tracking is incomplete or lead quality isn't being reviewed properly, you might be making decisions based on a partial picture. And finally, could performance be improved? Sometimes the issue isn't the channel itself. It might be the targeting, the message, the landing page, or the follow-up process, or the way the activity is being measured even. So before you decide to protect, improve, reduce, or stop something, it's worth asking these questions first. And just as I kind of draw towards our final poll, for me anyway, this is often best done on paper, for you to sit down away from the screen and to have these 4 categories in front of you and start putting activity and costs associated into these 4 categories, and then start to kind of work through them one by one. But maybe that's because I can sometimes be old school, but that's the way that I would do it anyway. Now let's move on to our final quick question. I'm going to launch our final poll on screen. And the question is, when marketing budgets are reduced, what tends to get cut first in your organization? Okay. And look, we can be honest with each other. These responses aren't going to be, published outside of this room. So don't worry. So let me just launch this final question. You should see it on your screen very soon. Again, this is a multiple choice question, so you can choose as many of these answers as you want. But I think this is really helpful for us to see and obviously to learn from each other today. So the question again, when marketing budgets are reduced, what tends to get cut first in your organization? Fantastic. Most people have cast a vote. Give 20 more seconds for anyone else if you want to. You can select more than one option. So set those that feel relevant to you. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's end this poll and share the results with everyone. So let me click those buttons and share. Okay, great. So let's go through them together. So 28% saying brand awareness activity, 5% for content, 19% SEO, 0 for organic social, 60% for paid media, 49% for events, 63% agency or freelance support, and 19% tools reporting or software. This is really, really interesting, isn't it? I think there might be some surprises to you there. There might be some things which actually back up the decisions that you've made previously. One thing I'm kind of glad to see is that there's relatively low numbers behind things like, SEO, content, organic social and so on, and I can understand why, but obviously their great thing is to keep going actually when budgets are under pressure, because obviously there's a bigger picture and longer term view to be had. I didn't expect such high numbers, if I'm honest, from paid media, events, agency or freelance support. I think they're quite significant, aren't they? But really interesting to see those. So thank you for sharing your experience with everyone today. So thank you. Great. So we're going to start to come into land. I want to just cover this point, which is how we communicate then this decision internally. So we've looked at the framework, and if you're going through this process now or in the future, hopefully you can use this framework to help you to kind of make better decisions. But actually the next step after that is then communicating those decisions internally, because making the right recommendation is only part of the challenge, right? You also need to explain it in a way that makes sense to the people around you, especially if the recommendation involves reducing, pausing or stopping activity that stakeholders are kind of used to seeing, right? So this is where kind of, language really matters. So I want to be quite practical here, right? So a simple way to make your recommendation even stronger is to always frame it commercially, because let's be honest, the people you're speaking to will be commercially driven. They've said to you that a budget's going to be reduced or needs to stop for a period of time and so on. So there's a commercial sense there. So if you then go back to them with fluffy, sentimental language, it doesn't quite tick the box. We've got to put our kind of commercial hat on. So instead of saying, yeah, we should keep PPC, you might want to just say, PPC is creating qualified demand at an acceptable cost per acquisition. So we recommend protecting it. I think it's a really kind of simple thing, like when you hear it, but commercial language does really resonate with those people who are making these decisions. Or you could also say, paid social isn't working. So rather than saying something like that, where it's quite broad, isn't it? You might say, this has potential, but the current setup isn't strong enough to justify increasing spend. So we should improve the targeting, creative or landing page before putting more budget behind it. So these are kind of just little examples on screen of what you could, or how you could position this to stakeholders more clearly. And it shows that the recommendation is not based on preference, but it's actually based on evidence, commercial value, and the role that each activity plays. Now, when you're recommending to reduce or stop activity, it's important to show the trade-off. because budget decisions are rarely just about removing spend. We all know that, right? They're usually about choosing where that spend or time is better placed. So if you recommend reducing one area, be clear about what you're protecting instead. So for example, you might reduce broad awareness kind of campaign spend so that you can protect high intent search. Or you might pause a weaker campaign so that you can improve the landing page. Now it's also important to explain what you expect to happen as a result of this. So after changing focus or reducing budget or what have you, will lead volume reduce slightly or lead quality improve? Will short-term visibility dip but conversion rate improve? Will you save budget now and review the impact in 3 months? I think it's really important to be transparent with stakeholders about what you actually expect to happen as a result of these decisions. And that gives stakeholders a clearer picture as to why you've made the decision, and it keeps the door open for further conversation. And the final point I want to make in this section is just to make your recommendation easy to approve. Now, that doesn't mean oversimplifying it or hiding the detail. It means presenting it in a way that helps stakeholders make a confident decision. So if you go too deep into channel level detail, you can lose people. They may not need that kind of level of detail about every campaign and keyword and audience and content topic. But actually, what they usually need first is the commercial logic. So what are you recommending? Why are you recommending it? What impact do you expect it to have? And what risk are you managing? Right, so they're 4 really important points when you're making it easy for a decision maker to sign off. I just want to repeat those again. So what are you recommending? Why are you recommending it? What impact do you expect it to have? And what risk are you managing? And you can always have the detail ready, right? If people ask for it, you've got it there, you can refer to it, and you can add to your main point. But I think the main recommendation needs to be clear, focused, and linked to business impact. And that's what helps the conversation move from opinion to decision. Now, before we move towards wrapping this session up, I want to leave you with a practical checklist. This is something you can use if you're ever in a position where budgets are being reviewed, reduced, or scrutinized more closely. Because when pressure is high, it can be tempting to jump straight into the decision. What can we pause? What can we reduce? Come on, let's. But actually, before you get there, it's worth slowing the decision down slightly and asking a few important questions. So these are the kind of questions I'd encourage you to ask. So first, what business goal does this activity support? If it doesn't clearly support a business goal, that doesn't automatically mean it should just stop, but it does mean the purpose needs to be challenged. Second question is, what evidence do we have that it's working? So that might be direct commercial evidence like leads or sales, or it might be supporting evidence like visibility, engagement, trust, authority building, or even just helping people move through the decision-making process. These are things which are often missed in this process. Thirdly, what would happen if we stopped it? So would we save money with minimal impact, or would we risk losing momentum, visibility, or future demand? And actually, if that's the case, let's just be honest about that and transparent with stakeholders internally. And finally, is the issue the activity itself or the execution of that activity? So sometimes, the channel is not the problem. The problem might be the targeting, the creative, the landing page, the follow-up process, or even the way that success is being measured. So if there's one kind of question I'd encourage you to take away from this section, it's this. Are we cutting this because it's low value or because it's hard to explain? And the distinction between the two is really important. Some marketing activity is genuinely low value and should be stopped. If it isn't supporting the business, if it isn't creating useful outcomes, and it has no clear path to improvement, then obviously cutting it is the right thing to do. But sometimes activity gets questioned because it's harder to measure or explain. Now, that can happen with things like SEO, content, brand awareness, going to events, thought leadership, PR, or anything that doesn't always produce an immediate inquiry. And the answer isn't to protect those blindly, but it's to make sure you're judging them fairly. Because if something isn't strategically important but hard to explain, if something is strategically important, not isn't, but hard to explain, the first job may be improving how you measure, frame, or communicate its value before deciding whether it should be reduced or stopped. So let's summarize. When budgets are tight, the aim is not just to cut quickly. The aim is to actually just make better choices. That means using data to understand what is working now, what is supporting future demand, and where activity should be protected, improved, reduced, or stopped. Now, if this topic has kind of made you think, we're not completely sure what's working, or our data could be stronger, then that's exactly where Webbox could help. So this is not a sales pitch, but Webbox can review your tracking, reporting, your website or campaign, and identify where activity could be protected, improved, or even reduced or stopped. So the aim really is to give you a clearer view of what is working, where spend could work harder, and what the practical next steps should be. So if that would be useful, if it would just be worth having a kind of a conversation around that, feel free to scan that QR code, contact us, and we will arrange a call and pick this conversation up with you. Now, if there's one final thought I want to leave with you, it's this. So when budgets are tight, don't just cut. Please reprioritize with evidence. I hope that's kind of come across in today's session. And I hope that this framework is also a useful and practical tool that you can take away with you today. I would love to invite you to our upcoming webinars. We've got 2 more webinars in this current season. So you can scan that QR code, head over to our website, and you can register for either or both of those webinars. If you're not available on the particular dates, you can still register to receive a copy of the recording. So we'd love to have you on upcoming sessions. As I said at the start, this is a CPD accredited webinar. So if you're earning points towards your CPD, then you can scan this QR code, which will take you to a form just to allow you to kind of check into the session and receive a CPD certificate. I'll also give you a link in my follow-up email as well. So for now, I just want to say a massive thank you for joining me on this live webinar. I hope it's been helpful for you to have this practical framework. And as I say, if any of this kind of resonates with you, or if Webbox can support you in any way, please feel free to reply to my email this week. We can arrange a call and have a conversation. But for now, thank you for the time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.